Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, social media world. There's something I've been putting off for a quite a while that I'm no longer going to put off. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it right here live. You don't have to listen. It's going to be quite long. It'll give people an opportunity that want to dive a little bit deeper into my story, my background. How did I get here? Why do I do what I do? And why would you want to engage with me as a coach based on my story, my testimony, my background, my experience? So I'll start at the beginning. I'm from Kalamazoo, Michigan. Anybody from Michigan that knows Kalamazoo is across the creek from Battle Creek, where they make Cheerios. You could smell the Cheerios from where my parents used to live in Kalamazoo. They moved to Toledo when I was really young, so I didn't grow up in Michigan for very long, but long enough for me to be a Wolverine versus a Buckeye. My parents moved to Toledo, Ohio. I lived there for approximately 10 years. I was 10 or 11 years old when they moved from Toledo. In Toledo, I went to St. Clement's Catholic school. In Toledo, there's a Catholic elementary every few blocks. It's a very Catholic area. Um, and I really had quite a few friends, and I thought I was doing quite well. And then my mom and dad decided to move to Las Vegas, Nevada. That's a long ways away. And I remember how mad I was. For a couple years, I wanted to run away and go back to Toledo where my friends were. I didn't like the desert. It was hot. Um, I was made to go outside and do lots of manual labor. The house that my dad bought didn't have walls, so we dug trenches and carried blocks and helped the men that were there to build a fence. And these are my memories. And I was also thrown into public school at that point. My mom and dad didn't realize that in Las Vegas there's not a Catholic school in every corner. There was only one elementary school, probably had a 2-3 year waiting list, and I ended up in public school. My first public school experience was Booker, sixth grade center in Las Vegas. How they handle busing, because every school district has a bus a certain amount of kids to have federal money. They just decided to bus everyone in the sixth grade. So I went from one side of town literally to the other side of town on a bus to go to Booker, which had 12-foot fencing around it with razor wire on top, not to keep people out, but to keep people in. This literally was like a miniature prison. Now, coming from Catholic education, and one of the benefits of Catholic or any private education is it's usually a couple of steps above whatever the public education's, providing. What they were passing out, what they were teaching in the sixth grade center, I literally learned in third and fourth grade, and the teachers quickly learned that. So what did I end up doing? Passing out papers, picking up papers, being teacher's pet. So I'm on the bus from one side of town to the other with kids that I've never seen or experienced before. I was picked on because of the color of my skin. I was spit on, I was smacked around, and I was really treated really poorly, only based on my color of my skin. And I had no idea why. It was very confusing for me back then. So I was bullied on the bus. I was bullied at school for being the teacher's pet, and so I was not really enjoying myself, which is another reason why I just wanted to run away back to Toledo. Went to Cashman Junior High School in Las Vegas, which is again another public school, and learned that I had to hang out with the right group of kids to stop being picked on. And the right group for that is the wrong group, if you can follow my logic. Smoking, got into drinking and drugs at a fairly young age, begged my parents to send me to the only Catholic high school there. I just needed out of that environment. And I went to Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas. And a lot of people are familiar with Bishop Gorman because they're usually seated one or two in high school football in the nation. So again, I'm going to this Catholic high school, doing all sorts of things that I shouldn't be doing, hanging out with the wrong crowd at school. I had already started working. I had a full-time job, making more money than my mother, who was a legal secretary for all of her life, because the job I had involved tips. I worked at a restaurant. I worked in the kitchen. I bussed tables. I waited on tables. I did all these things as a kid. And after my confirmation, uh, my parents then gave me the option of what to do with my spirituality, what to do with my faith. And I left the church for about 11 years. So I just ran around Las Vegas doing anything and everything I wanted to do, hung out with all the wrong people, probably should have been dead several times with some of the things that happened around me and with the people I was hanging out with. And at the age of 28, miracle upon miracles, God sent people into my life uh, where I got sober. And I'm 30 years clean and sober at this point. But for a couple of years, I'm in AA. I'm going to meetings every day. I'm secretarying a meeting. I find a sponsor, and again, I have a sponsor who is extremely strong in his sobriety and in his sponsoring. So I'm hardcore going into the steps, not not wasting any time. And eventually, he says you need to start sponsoring. And I'm like, I'm 6 months, 8 months sober. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I feel like I don't have the experience. But he says you need to be sponsoring, and I did it the way I usually do things. If you ask me to do something, I'm a little intense, and I can be a little over the top. And I, instead of sponsoring one or two people, which is generally speaking what most people in 12-step groups do, because you have a job and all that, you have a life, and you sponsor a couple people. I was sponsoring 12 or 13 men within a couple of weeks. I was going to meetings at Salvation Army and places like that. And I started eventually having meetings at my house. I'm having 12-step meetings at my house. I have such a crew. Um, and for about 2.5, 3 years, this is what I did. And it was some of the best years of my life was when I was being of service and I was sponsoring all those men. And at that time, I had met my wife, Maria, my previous wife, Maria. We met in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. We got married. We had 3 children. And then about 11 years ago, so after about 17 years of marriage, and we moved around about 12 different times, and that's not an exaggeration, she passed away of cancer. We were very involved with a parish in Louisville, Kentucky at the time, so we had lots of great support. There were people bringing us meals. They sent house cleaners to the house. We just really had lots of beautiful support from our community during that time. During that time, I have my kids in grief counseling, and we're just trying to figure things out. Eventually, I know that I'm called to be a married man, so I opened myself up again for dating. I could spend hours talking about all those experiences, which weren't all good. And I met my current wife, Cami Jo, and she had 2 children. So I have 3 children, who has a mother who is deceased. She has 2 children. She had just recently been divorced, and um, dad wasn't always solidly in their lives, so they were almost kind of grieving at that point. And he did. He stepped back into her life eventually, but not then. And we're in counseling together, my wife and I, Cami Jo, before we got married, and even after we got married, we're talking to our pastor. We went on marriage retreats. We went to Retrovi, for anyone familiar with Retrovi, and literally the counseling, meeting with the pastor, and going to Retrovi kept making things worse. It was like throwing gasoline on the fire, on our problems that we had, the issues that we had, pointing fingers at each other. And in the meantime, we took our little band of family that was just having lots of problems and issues and fighting in Louisville, and we moved to Longview, Texas. Uh, and I'm glad that I did, because about 2 years after we moved to Longview is when like all heck broke loose in Louisville, and there were some riots and some real blow ups there. I knew that it was coming, that environment. So we were in a much smaller community. The kids were in classical education in Louisville, and we found a kind of a neat little Catholic school here. Eventually taking them out of that and putting them in some other education. But anyway, we're still fighting about sex and money and parenting, and we're just still fighting about everything. I went online and I started really taking a deeper dive on what's going on with this relationship? Why can't we seem to get it together? We really love each other. Like, we know that we're meant to be together, but we can't seem to have more than a few words without it turning into an argument and pointing fingers at each other and the whole bit. And I came across the group, and a lot of you are familiar with Man on Fire, and I started following Man on Fire, and I started getting their emails. And this was at a time, several years back. David was still writing his own copy. Like, David was writing his own emails, and they just reached inside of me and just twisted me up because he was speaking about me. Every email, I'm like, that's me. He was identifying the problem and talking about the solution. And I was really looking and seeking for like a Christian group, a Christian, Catholic solution, because I'll go back to 28, got sober. One of the things that happened after that is I realized that there is a God. Like, I stopped running from the fact that there is a God. And on my journey back to my faith, I didn't want to be Catholic. I didn't. I thought it was boring. I didn't like all the do this, don't do that. I wasn't catechized very well, even in Catholic schools, which is a problem. And so I studied Eastern philosophies for a little bit, and this honestly didn't make a lot of sense to me. There's a lot of holes there. Looked at Judaism. I didn't really spend much time with Islam at the time. The only thing that I'm seeing is in the news, a lot of people running around blowing up stuff. So I just kind of skipped over that. No judgment on the religion. I have quite a few friends now from that faith. And then it brought me back to Christianity. I'm like, okay, Christianity is it for me. I'll be Protestant. And so I started really looking into, all the Protestant denominations, and I started getting lost there because I'm like, okay, not everybody can be right. Somebody has to be wrong here. And it's just chaos. Thousands of different denominations. This pastor across the street from this pastor, even if they're the same denomination, not really teaching exactly the same thing. And I'm like, this is wild. I started listening to Catholic radio in Reno, Nevada, is where I lived at the time. And there are several apologetic men out of San Diego that were on this FM radio station. And I really started listening to them, and I started studying Catholic apologetics, which was bringing me back to the faith. I then started studying some of the Marian apparitions and some of the Eucharistic miracles, and that really brought me back, and I started going to church. And then in my church journey, I remember there was this monk from a monastery that came to the parish to teach a church history class. And then that solidified it. When you start reading some of the things that first, second, third, century Christians were writing, it's Catholic. So that brought me back to my Catholic faith. Again, I get married to Maria. We have children. She gets confirmed. All of our children are baptized and First Holy Communion and confession. And so we're just moving along, and then boom, she gets cancer in October 2013, and by March 2014 she had passed. Fast forward again, I get married to Cami Jo. We're struggling again. We're devoutly Catholic. We're not getting divorced, and we're working on this. And then I find Man on Fire. I join Man on Fire, and I start getting some real tough love, and a love and compassion and empathy that I didn't even feel in my own faith. I really never felt it in my own family. These men truly loved me back to health. They loved me back to who I really am. They loved me back so that I could love myself. And that is the key for most problems that men experience, is that they're not truly loving themselves. They don't know who they are. So here I am, I'm in Man on Fire, call it 9-10 months, and I have an opportunity to join the team. And so I did. I joined the team, and I took on some fairly low entry things. I was the community manager for the Facebook page. I started doing some coaching in some of the groups that they have. So I really have lots of experience in group coaching, which is not the norm in life coach world. So I do have a lot of experience in group coaching, which is what I offer is brotherhood group, and I started taking calls. I started doing one-on-one, and over the 5 years with them, I coached thousands of men from all over the world, from every faith background. The youngest was about 18 or 19. The oldest about 80 or 84. So age doesn't matter. The color of skin doesn't matter. The faith background doesn't matter. The men have a very common problem, common problems, and it manifests itself in lots of different stories. So when men are sharing stories, you might be looking for the differences. Oh, well, that never happened to me. I'm looking at the similarities. I know where it stems from. So when you deeply learn where everything is coming from, and you go to the root instead of keep trimming branches, instead of trying to cut back the weeds, if you don't get the roots, they just keep coming back, which I believe is what a lot of men experience when they do maybe a little self-help and they read a book, or they attend a men's group at church, which is not bad. I highly recommend that, but it's not going to solve all the emotional and physical problems that men are having and carrying around. So I was part of a men's group at church. I did Acts retreats at church. I was part of the Acts retreat group that gave retreats. Um, I did men's Bible study at church. So I'm also very well versed in what those all are, and what they have to offer and what's missing. Challenge, support, and accountability is what I kept learning. I learned that from Man on Fire. Then even when I started doing some formal coaching training, which I have, PCCI, Professional Christian Coaching Institute, which I have taken classes at, Clifton Strengths Assessments. I have some training and assessments to give. And then just in my background, my parents did open a business when I was about 14. I ended up working for them for many years. So I come from a family owned business background. They sold to the Toshiba Corporation, and I worked for them for several years. So I have a corporate background, and they sent me to a lot of management training seminars, and how to deal with people and communication and all these things. So I have lots of training in that area, which also helps me in my current coaching role. So my experience with AA, my business experience from both the entrepreneur and corporate world, lots of training in the corporate world brought forward, my own, training and experiences with Man on Fire, and besides they trained me. I would take other um, classes or go experience other programs while I was working for them, and then now, for an example, just a couple weeks ago, I went to a Catholic men's retreat put on by the Kingsmen called the Samson Retreat. It's a Catholic men's healing retreat that I just went to. So I continuously work on myself. I have coaches that I have calls with on a regular basis. So if you are seeking a coach, make sure that they themselves are still working and growing and have a coach. That should be one of your questions to them. Do you have a coach? I'm surprised at how many coaches that I talk to that don't. Because again, here it is. I want to help you, and if I'm not being helped, I'm going to get to a point where I can't help you anymore, and I don't want that to happen. I want to be able to keep helping you as long as you need help and want help, and support and challenge and accountability. I want to be there for you. Now, men experience all sorts of problems. A lot of problems, if you're in social media watching this, tends to stem from the relationship. You're having relationship issues. I had lots of relationship issues. I was creating those because I wasn't taking responsibility for my part. I wasn't speaking up about the things that I needed and wanted from the relationship. And I had a lot of wounds, mommy wounds, daddy wounds, wounds from girlfriends in high school, wounds from previous relationships, wounds from losing my wife, wounds from not performing well in school. Again, there's all sorts of things that I was carrying around with me. And as I shed those things off, as I pushed those things off, and allowed the masculine man to emerge more and more, he's not completely emerged yet, by the way, but more and more he emerges. I've noticed differences with my wife. She then started really taking a stronger look at where she was coming from, where she was at in her own trauma and wounds. because I started showing up in a way that created more safety for her, that she could trust me more, and that she could start seeing what part was hers, because it was easy to blame me for everything when I was blamable. I wasn't taking responsibility. I wasn't doing what I needed to do, so it makes it really easy to say, well, this is all your fault. And I grew myself to the point where, okay, this is mine, that's yours. And she's like, wow, okay, now I need to start taking a look at this, because now I can see the line. Before, she couldn't see the line because I was just being it was terrible. Yes man and a pleaser. If you're a yes man and a pleaser, I'm one of those. Passive aggressive. I want to keep the peace until you push my buttons enough, and then I'm going to explode. I can absolutely tune you out for 3-4 days at a time. If I can put the walls up, I've done that. I've done all these things, and it only, again, just makes things worse. Got to be able to be who I am, be congruent with who I am, and authentically love myself, so that I can express what I need to express from a place of love, compassion, and empathy, and not from a place of wounded little boy, not from a place of woundedness, not from a place of anger, not from a place of resentment, because that's where a lot of these problems stem from. Is a man doesn't know how to express himself without those things, because he also wants to point fingers and blame his wife for everything. So that's most of my story. I'm sure there's all sorts of other things that I could share if you want to know more. But again, at the core of it, I'm 30 years clean and sober. I have 40 some years of work experience. I started working at the age of 11, and I'm 58. So I have lots of work experiences, and that includes managing people. So I have a lot of people skills. And then I have coaching skills that I've not only learned and experienced over coaching thousands of men, but then I do have some solid reinforced professional training. And I would love to work with you men that need help, need assistance, and I am very challenging to work with. So be ready to take full responsibility. Be ready to be challenged, pushed a little bit, pulled a little bit, because without that, there is no growth. Without being uncomfortable, there is no change. Without getting emotional, there's no leverage for change. So these are the things that I help men with. So if you have any other questions about anything I shared, please don't be afraid to reach out, email me, make a comment if this is on social media. And again, I would love to have a conversation with you.